Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Enrollment Rx's webinar series, Reaching New Heights on Salesforce for Admissions. I am Lawrence Levy. I'm the president of Enrollment Rx. Thanks so much again for joining us. I'm joined by my colleague, Matt Palmer. Matt, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. My name is Matt Palmer. I'm the Director of Client Success here at Enrollment Rx. I've been here almost 8 years and multiple certified, but we're really excited about today's webinar to share insights I've had working with clients over the years when it comes to reports and dashboards.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And yeah, I'm excited as well because Matt is a great example of the kind of experience that our team has on working with colleges and universities for really since 2008 in deploying Salesforce and the CRM technology for recruitment and admissions. And in that experience, we've certainly learned a lot about the best practices and the types of reports and dashboards and the kinds of data analytics that our clients really need to use and measure using Salesforce. So that's what we're excited to present to you today. For our agenda, we're going to cover a few things. So the first thing we're going to start with at the top is really talking about the data insight tools that are available in Salesforce. So we're going to really spend time reviewing Listviews, reports, and dashboards and describing those. And Matt will explain to us the different scenarios under which a user might choose to use one versus the other and the different advantages of each. But all of those are the tools that our clients are using with Salesforce to really measure their data. After that, we're going to talk about data governance and the user experience. How can we control what data users actually have access to? When a user logs into the system, can we control what reports and dashboards they can see, maybe based on their job or their role or their profile or their level of access and their security settings? So those are what we call data governance, and Matt will describe all of that as it pertains to the reports and dashboards. And then, of course, as always, we want to talk about configurability, composability, to the extent that everything's drag and drop and can be created without needing a software engineering degree. That is certainly part of everything that we talk about at our company. And then, of course, Matt's going to take us through a demonstration of all of that. So just to reiterate very briefly here, so the three things that we're going to look at in the demonstration are what Salesforce calls Listviews, and then reports and dashboards. And again, Matt will explain the different scenarios under which clients might use to use one versus the other and the practicality of each. But all of those are important components of what our clients are using with the CRM technology. After that, we're going to describe that data governance again, talking about how do we segment data by roles and profiles, and how do we establish those sharing rules? How can we create that personalized user experience? So if I'm a director of admissions versus someone on the recruiting team, when I log into the system, what can I see? What can I do? What kinds of reports and dashboards am I supposed to be measuring my own performance on? And how can we control that user experience? And then, of course, creating and saving those list views, reports, and dashboards for repeated use, as well as can users get their reports and dashboards maybe emailed to them, or can they receive them in an automated fashion? And so we'll describe all of those kinds of user experiences. And then, as mentioned, as always, configurability, composability, drag and drop, creation of everything, including cloning, as well as emphasizing full access across the data model. So what does that mean? That means that if you create some custom field, let's say on your application at your institution, you ask some specific question that maybe nobody even asks. Well, can you report on that field? Is there a difference between that field and every standard field? Or if you create a whole new data table, a whole new object, as it's described in Salesforce speak, so can you report on those objects, or are there limitations? And of course, the emphasis for us is always there's no distinction, there's no limitation across the data model and across the architecture, whether it's standard or custom fields, standard or custom objects and data tables. All of those are available in the reporting and dashboard engine and within Listviews as well. So that's something that we will describe. And then intelligent logic and filters. Do I need a software engineering degree to create these reports and dashboards? Do I need to be a SQL developer? Can I just say things like, show me all of my new inquiries that came in today or this week or next week? Can I say things like that? Or do I need to be able to code in some of those kinds of logic? And again, we'll show you a lot of examples of intelligent logic and filters, making it very easy for the end user from a composability perspective. So all of that is what we're going to describe in today's demonstration. And with that, I've taken enough time. Let me start presenting here. I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and he'll take us through all of that. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Lawrence, for that kind of introduction to reports and dashboards. And one of the things I just want to highlight before we kind of jump into things is, I've been working with Salesforce, 8+ years now, and I have a background in admissions. So I used to, do recruiting and reporting and cohorts and all that stuff. And it's mission critical, right? To, as the director of admissions or as a rep, to be able to see what's going on in your system. The value of Salesforce in a CRM and tools like Enrollment Rx are that you can take actionable insights and start to see trends and make smart decisions in your recruiting efforts, right? And so really some of the things that we're going to highlight today are going to be things that I've seen clients use over the years, maybe some examples that, could be helpful for you using the system. Some of the things that we're going to talk about today, such as Listviews, reports, and dashboards, are all just native Salesforce functionality. So a lot of the things that we talk about are going to be the same, whether you're doing recruitment and admissions, or you work at, say, a bank using the Salesforce for different purposes. The data is, of course, going to be different, but the kind of features that we talk about will be the same. There are, however, two kind of proprietary things that we have developed as a company that I'll highlight at the end that really, I think, gives value into our product and how that can take those insights to the next level. So that's going to be kind of our topic for today. With that, what we're looking at as I log into Salesforce is what's called a home page. One of the great things about a home page in Salesforce, and this will be a theme that you see as we go through this presentation, is that Salesforce is extremely customizable to the end user. So when I first log in, perhaps as the director of admissions, I can see the data that I need to see at my fingertips, where as a recruiter, when I log in as a recruiter, even though it's the same system and everything like that, the interface and the things that I see can be customized to what I need to do. And what this allows you to do is take a very kind of complex and powerful system and really kind of boil it down to make it easy and accessible for the end user. And most of the things that we're going to talk about today are, you'll hear this word composable, but basically all that means is we don't need a developer. It's just clicks, right? So as a trained admin, you can just quickly make those updates and changes, in a matter of seconds to meet a business requirement. So with that said, what you're looking at here on this homepage, you'll notice some colorful graphs. And here you can kind of see some insights that I might want to see as the director of admissions, such as what is my current application funnel as far as term and status? What are the lead sources that are performing the best, right? So if I have a marketing campaign, what is actually performing at the highest level and what should I continue to invest in? How are my reps doing, right? So the people on my team, how are they tracking based on, their goals for, the recruitment cycle? Perhaps we have something related to scholarships. And then you can see some other things here that are not report related, that are just more features of Salesforce, such as recent records I've accessed and things of that nature. Now, the first thing we're going to kind of dive into together is what's called a list view. List views are, the way I think of it, is an actionable segmentation. The main difference between a list view and a report that we'll talk about later is, I would say a report is a little bit more powerful in the data that it can pull in, but a list view is a little bit more actionable, right? So think of it as your to-do list, as your target list, as your list of things you need to take immediate action on, where a report will give you more holistic insights into what's going on to your system. So we'll cover both of those things today. And then finally, dashboards that we'll cover today is just a graphical representation of reports kind of put into one place. So you can kind of have all your kind of reports, and it gives you some abilities to visualize those things a little bit differently than just a report by itself. So with that, I'm going to go here to my homepage, and you'll see at the top here, I have tabs across the top. These tabs represent different items within Salesforce. So the central kind of focus point in what's called an object in Salesforce, think of it maybe as a data table, is going to be the contact object. Think of this as your main constituent object. So the person that raises their hand, the bio demo information about the person, everything kind of related to that one singular individual. Now, the beauty of a CRM is that one singular individual could have many things related to it, such as multiple applications, multiple campus visits, and things of that nature. And that's what makes a CRM a CRM. So if I go ahead and click on contacts, the first thing that is going to load here is what's called a list view. This is basically your ability to look at the contact object and filter or create a targeted list. So as Lawrence mentioned, I don't have to write code for this. I don't have to write any sort of like SQL or anything like that. I can just simply, even as a non-system admin, if I have the right permissions, I could go in here and build my own list. So if I need to come in and build a target list based on certain attributes of students to reach out to, students to help, I can do that very quickly. Now, what you'll notice here is I navigate here. This shows me recently viewed records that I've seen. But if I click this little down arrow, you'll see a number of different list views populate. Now, one of the great features of Salesforce is it gives you really powerful sharing governance so that, as a admissions recruiter, I'm probably not going to see all these because you can set sharing rules around what list views can be kind of seen so you don't kind of get jumbled up here. And you can just have like the 3 or 4 that you use all the time. So it gives you a really powerful way to govern that. But as a recruiter, perhaps I want to say, all right, I'm sitting here doing my job. I want to know what students have been assigned to me and what students I need to help, right? That's priority number 1. So one of the first ways that I could do that is I can navigate to a list view. And let's go ahead and navigate to this list view that's called New This Week. So if I click on this, I can see in the last week, so Salesforce defines a week as 7 days. Here are the records that have been created. So I can see their name. I can see what's called a lead source. So this is their created source that gets hard-coded with them. And the beauty of a lead source is you'll know their first created source so that if you need to do any historical reporting that says, let's say the VP of marketing says, hey, what is the primary source for, created source for most of our admits, right? And then, I could run a report easily, like in a matter of minutes to give those insights. I can see bio demo information such as email. I can see what's called an admission status. So this is something that we use as part of our product called admission status. It's a field that is customizable. So the statuses that you see here, we use inquiry as kind of a default status. But if you wanted to call it something else like suspect as an example, as part of your kind of funnel, 100% customizable, and it could be kind of whatever fits your terminology at your university. Here you can see a record type. A record type in Salesforce just defines the type of record it is. And so what I mean by that is a contact could be a student, right? So in this case, a prospect or an applicant, but you could have contacts in your system that aren't students, but you still can have the same kind of feature set around contacts. So what I mean by that is perhaps you have high school counselors, perhaps you have a business development representative, and those records are still contacts that you can still communicate with, have list views for. And that's the beauty of Salesforce is it really provides a scalable options, but also, strong governance between those different options. And then the one, I guess, concept to explain in Salesforce is that every record in Salesforce is required to have an owner. So an owner of a record is assigned, based on different factors. Here I can see that I am the current owner of these records. One of the tools that we offer as part of our core product is a very declarative way to manage those assignments, so that if somebody raises their hand for program A and perhaps is, a traditional student, or somebody raises their hand for program B and is an international student, we give you a clicking, a very easy interface to manage those assignments automatically, so that when this record is first created, this ownership gets defined right away with team A, team B, team C. And it's a very powerful tool that we offer called Assignment Manager. But going into this, I can see, the columns of information, and these are the fields that I see currently. Now let's talk a little bit about how I can update this list view. So if I navigate over here to the gear icon, this is called List View Controls. And if I click this, you'll notice that I can create a new list view. I could clone this list view, which is by far my favorite feature of Salesforce in general. You'll notice this with reports, dashboards, and things of that nature, where as soon as you kind of have the baseline of what you want, it's very, very easy to scale this up and create a lot of these features very quickly. I could rename this. I can define who can see this report. And then, but the two things I want to kind of hone in on here are what's called edit list filters and select fields to display. Okay, so let's talk about edit list filters first. So if I click edit list filters, this is defining my filter on the contact object, because without this, it would perhaps show every contact in my system. So I want to go ahead and define what types of contacts that I want to see. So Salesforce gives you a very composable ability to add filters and add filter logic. The first filter it always provides is this option of all contacts or my contacts. So what's great about this is perhaps you set up, I have had clients do this where they set up a primary list view that's like my new contacts this week. But that's a shared list view, because me viewing it as a, let's say recruiter A, and then Lawrence reviewing that as recruiter B, even though that the columns are going to be the same and the filter is going to be the same, the data that actually renders will be different, because it's respecting only records that I own. But if Lawrence is logged in, it's only going to respect records that Lawrence owns. So the beauty of this is, instead of, let's say you had 10 people on your team, instead of having to build 10 list views, like list view for Lawrence, list view for Matt, while you could do that, you could just build one list view that says my contacts, and it's very easy to just implement right away. So right now I have all contacts. And then one of the great features of Salesforce, and this transfers over to reporting as well, is this kind of idea of friendly language for filters. So we can link, perhaps as part of the deck here, like some resources on this. But when it comes to date fields, right? So here I can have created date, any sort of date field related to this record. It respects concepts such as today. So writing the word today is going to be 24 hours. This week, meaning in the last 7 days. Or I could define it as this month, this year, this quarter, last month, last year. So instead of having to put a specific range in, which you can do, but the value here is, gives you very strong flexibility to use easy language to define your requirements as far as when these records were created in this example. And then the final thing here is you can define, in order to kind of make these edits, you can see the pencil icon populate, relates to defining the record type. So the record type in this target I've defined as that prospect applicant record type, whereas perhaps if I wanted a faculty list view, or let's say a high school counselor list view, I would just define that record type differently, right? One thing I do want to mention here is Salesforce does give you the ability to add filter logic. So right now you can see that I have 1 and 2 as true. But if I added a third value, such as admission status is this, it will default to 1 and 2, but we can also go to 1 and 2 or 3, right? So get into algebra a little bit if you know, dust off those memories, but you know, with the brackets and so forth. But you can build some really, both in reports and dashboards and list views, build some more advanced logic to your filters if you'd like to. Not a requirement, but it is a nice feature to have. So as I navigate here, one thing I do, the second thing I want to highlight is the ability to select additional fields to add to my list view. So one of the fields I want to add in this example is the created date. So even though I know it was created this week, these records, I actually want to see the date and time that it was created. So the way that I would do that is I would navigate to select fields to display. And then what you're seeing here is just an alphabetical sorting of every field that lives on the contact object, right? And so if I go down here, and I'm only going to see all these if I have permission to see them. So there's some governance that can happen there. But I'm going to go ahead and try to find the created date for the record. And here I can see right down here. There it is. Once I select that, I can move this over. And I can order the columns of my list view, saying if I want to reorder any of these, just by clicking the up and down arrow. So here I have created date. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Once I've saved this, you can notice here that this kind of cuts it off a little bit. And so what I can do is just simply drag this over to make this expanded. I can see the dates that these records were created. Now, one of the great things about Salesforce is this is hard coded. This will never change. So if you're trying to think about when a record actually is created in the system, you will always have that data as long as that record exists. It cannot change. So one of the things I can do here, and what I would do if I was an admissions counselor, is I would sort by created date. So I can click this up or down. I can do this with any of these as far as a grouping. And then here I can see that today I had a record created where I had 3 records created yesterday. I could see one came in through an RFI, one was from a high school fair, one was through perhaps a GMAT import, and one was perhaps through a SAT import. And I can see those records directly in this list view. Now let's talk about an example where I want to take this one level up and say, okay, well, this is helpful to see all my records this week, but what if we looked at all new records today? So the way that I would do that in that scenario is I would click the gear icon. I would go down to clone, and then they're going to kind of default this to put copy in front of, but what you can just do here is say new contacts today. I'm just going to put a little note that this is mine. You'll notice a specific name. And then here is kind of the groupings that I talked about. So I can make it private to me. I can say all users can see this view, or I can specify a certain group of users, right? Perhaps just admissions counselors to share this list view with. So when we're talking about governance, these are some of the controls that you have. I'm going to put it just to me for the time being. I'm going to hit save. And what you'll notice is that no changes have happened yet. So even though I've renamed this, all it's done is copied all the existing settings that I had before. But now when I go over to the filter, I can click into this week and just simply type today instead, hit done, hit save, and now I see only the record that was created for me today. One of the features that is probably the favorite feature of a lot of schools that I work with, I'm going to go ahead and navigate back to new this week, is you can take actions on these lists, right? So it's great to be able to build the target, but the question is, well, what can I do with it then? So you can navigate to the record detail directly, but if there was something that you need to update, directly, in this case, it probably wouldn't be lead source, but perhaps it's like phone number or something. You can select multiple records and it will give you the option to update multiple items. There's not really a limit. You can do up to 200 at a time and mass update those things in a very efficient way. So it gives you the ability to quickly update a lot of records, without, being a coder or, a developer or something like that. One of the things I wanted to highlight here though is, so we click these and shows kind of the actions that you can take. But there's a feature, this is probably the favorite feature of most of my clients, that's called send list email. So let's pretend for a second, emails can be automated through Salesforce or, marketing and cloud account engagement if you have that, or marketing tools. But let's just say like you had like an upcoming event and this was your target list for that. And you just wanted the counselor to quickly just send a quick email that's more targeted to like these 5 at once or 4 at once. I can select this and then I can click this button that says send list email. And here I can manually write in an email, but if I have a template that's already created for me, this is where I can, put in some sort of, email template. So if I have an existing email template, you can see this one gets populated and I can update this. But let's say you just have an initial outreach template you want your, counselors to be able to quickly use, send that list email. I can schedule that, I can send it. And then as soon as that's sent, it's associated to their related record. The next thing I want to talk about is, in terms of Listviews, is this concept of tasks and activities within Salesforce. So think of these as your kind of to-do items, to-do lists. These things can, again, be created automatically, let's say through automation, or just manually. So if I was the director of admissions, I needed to manually create a task for somebody on my team to follow up with a student, I could use the task item or task kind of object to manage that. But one of the things I wanted to highlight here is that what you're seeing in the list view is kind of what's called a table view, right? It's kind of what we saw already. But Salesforce offers you 2 other interfaces that are quite helpful. I would see this mostly a lot of times used with tasks. So when I click this select list display, I have 2 other options. So the first one is I can do what's called a split view, where I can click the details of the task. This is my list, but over here is the specific record detail that I can quickly make edits in. I could do the same thing with contacts if I wanted to. But the other one that I use a lot, I think is a really helpful tool, is what's called a Kanban view. So a Kanban view, in order for that to work, you need some sort of like grouping that you can use. So perhaps it's a mission status, perhaps it's, in this case, a status of a task. And again, these statuses can be, these are just kind of out of the box, but customized to whatever fits your business process. But what you can see here is that it groups it into, all right, well, I have 103 I haven't done. I have 7 that I've in progress. I have 0, completed. Now this filter shows all overdue, so that's why there's 0 completed. But if I were to change the filter saying all my tasks, I could do that accordingly. But what's great about this is with the drag and drop is I could simply move this over and the task would be completed. And then I could refresh my page and move on. So this is just another interface that Salesforce allows you to kind of navigate through when managing your list views, again, on any object. One last thing I just want to mention that is kind of a nice interface piece is if I know that I'm using new this week as my main list view, I can tab that on a personal level so that every time I go to my contact list view, the first one that shows here is going to be new this week, not recently viewed. It's going to default back to that. One last thing I just want to mention on list views is those can be dragged and dropped onto your homepage, similar to reports. So the first thing a counselor sees, instead of having to navigate to their contacts, is just those list views right in front of them so they can do their job. I've done this a lot with, a recent community college I worked with. I have it dynamic so that depending on the counselor, the first thing the counselor sees when they log in is stuff just related to them so they can take quick action and don't have to click, a bunch of places. All right, with that, I think we can move on to reports and dashboards. So the difference with a report is reports are a grouping of data that can be on either one object or multiple objects. And I would say reports have a lot more kind of insight capability than a list view. A list view is only going to be relevant to the object we're talking about. So in the case of contacts, just fields related to the contact, where a report can take multiple related objects and put them together. So a common example might be a contact and an application, and putting those 2 things together in all those fields in a particular report. Before I dive into the specifics of the report, I just want to mention something here. So what we're looking at are what are called folders. I'm not going to take a super deep dive on this, but just know that folders have a governance so that if you were trying to build reports that maybe have more proprietary information or private information, you could create a private kind of lockdown folder with those reports in it that only certain people have access to. The same would be the same concept with dashboards. So if you have the requirement to kind of segment your information a little bit, you can do that. So if I go ahead and look here, I can see recent reports that I've accessed, and I can see, different kind of groupings here. The first kind of report I want to talk about is going to be, let's say, a lead source performance report. I'm going to go ahead, I could click that tab, but I'm just going to go ahead and navigate to it. And what we're viewing here is the end result of the report. So we're not editing the report right now. We're just viewing the data. And this report is representing, in this case, show me all lead sources. So show me all the records kind of in the system by lead source. So here we could see, College Fair has a certain amount, Common App has 18% of it. Requests for information about 20%. Our highest lead source at 34% is a different RFI, perhaps embedded on our website. So it gives you an aggregation where you can graphically see the groupings of your different lead sources here. So this is what's called a graph within Salesforce. Now below here are going to be the details of those records related to the graph. Now what's really helpful is on a personal level, you can choose to not detail these rows to see a more clean kind of summary. So if I uncheck this box, I can see now a very summarized, clean way to view the data without having to see each record. Now, if I wanted to see each record, I could by unchecking that again. But again, you can see just a really quick kind of summary here that you can see. And then you can, choose to subtotal this or grand total this, but this essentially gives you some insights into the report. Now let's talk about the construction of a report and how that's perhaps a little bit different than a dashboard. So if I now go over to my edit field right here, I'm now looking behind the scenes and how to construct a report. And again, everything we're talking about right now, maybe not the data itself, but just the functionality is just all native Salesforce. And so what you can see here is the preview, right? So one of the things that sometimes throws people off is, just grabs a little bit of your data in the preview. And then when you actually run your report, it queries all the data. But this shows you kind of a quick snapshot as you're building a report. But you can see this is your report preview in this middle section. And then what you'll notice here is you have two kind of tabs. One is called outline and one is called filter. So filter is going to look familiar, right? Where we were just building filters in Listviews. This is going to be similar here where we're going to go ahead and build filters. But in this case, we can reference a contact or an application record or an account in our filter, right? So we can reference fields from any of these objects, where before we were just able to build a filter around just the contact object. So if I were to search for a new filter, I can certainly do that and type in a filter here. In a similar way before, I can say my contacts, all accounts, which are the same as contacts, or my team's contacts. This is really helpful. We'll show a report here at the end where it says my team, where if you define the governance, kind of what's called a role in Salesforce, it just respects that related to my team. So in the role hierarchy, which is easy to kind of set up, if I'm the director of the missions and I have 5 people under me, if I were to select my team, this will automatically pull in records owned by all my counselors on my team. So instead of having to type each counselor name, it's just a very quick and scalable way that I can build that report. Here I can define any sort of date field. So activity, maybe it's created date. We talked about that in our last kind of example. And here I'm just saying any record that a lead source is not equal to blank. So they have to have a lead source. So this kind of can show me this. Now, if I wanted to add some parameters, such as, let's say, created date. Here, I can say, well, created date is equal to, and here, similar to what I said before, I can either reference a specific field, I could pick a date, or I could use a relative date. Here is similar language to what we used in our list view example. But if I wanted to say, let's say, last 60 days, I'm not sure what will populate here, but I can go ahead and hit apply. You can see this now updated in the preview, right? Now, this is not my final result. This is just telling you what, kind of changes were made. So I could say create a date last 60 days. And this now I could save as if I wanted to, similar to a Word document, and create, lead source performance report for last 60 days as my new report. So as I look at this here, I can see, create date last 60 days all time. And similar to before, I can do a filter logic and cross filter. So I can add logic such as 1 and 2 and 3, or 1 and 2 or 3. So I can add that sort of logic here. And a cross filter basically is if there's a related object in your report, let's say activities. So show me all admits with no pending activity. I could add what's called a cross filter to kind of build that more targeted list. So that's kind of a feature there. Now, related to the outline feature, so if I detail the rows again, and I'll go ahead and refresh this, I can see all the kind of columns, right, that I have in my report, and that relates right here. So perhaps in my report, I don't need mailing city or mailing street. I can simply just click the X right here and remove that. And I could just maybe remove a couple of those. And when I do that, I can hit refresh and it will go ahead and update my interface. It just takes a minute to catch up here. And I can quickly, just as simple as just clicking that X, remove that. If I want to add a new field, I can search for that field here, or they give you an option to actually view all fields over here in order to, see that. So if I click view fields, I can see more of a display version of all the contact fields there. I can create a formula within my report if I want to. I can search for a specific field. So let's say in this example, I want to search for admission status. I could just write, admissions status, query that field and be able to drag it over. So again, it's just kind of a drag and drop interface between the two. So here I can take my, admission status. I could just double click it if I wanted to, and it would go ahead and add it to this report. I could refresh it, and you can see that this active application or this admission status was added first. So if I want to drag and drop that, I can. Now, the grouping of reports that we see right now, we're grouping by rows. So right now we have the lead source kind of piece here. But if I wanted to, group columns and create more of what's called a matrix report, I could do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just refresh this page here. So as this is building here, I can now add a second group here where I can say admission status. And I'm going to refresh this preview. And what this is going to allow me to do is create a grouping by, you can see here, lead source and admission status, which gives me, if you've used pivot tables in the past, think of this basically as a pivot table within Salesforce. So now if I built this report, I have this here grouped by lead source and this, and I can save and run. The update was saved. But now what you'll notice is basically, the same kind of chart here, but some different details accordingly. So what I can do here, let me just show you this, is I can change the chart type based on my grouping. So under this performance report here, I have the grouping here. You see here where I can click the chart properties. These are the different charts I can select to visualize my data. So in this case, it's really helpful to see this, I would say, as a stacked bar, because we're viewing this as, a stacking of two data points together. So perhaps I want to stack this by admission status. I'm going to go ahead and do this and save and run. And what a stack bar is going to allow you to do, just take a minute to load here. I'm going to go ahead and remove detail rows like I talked about before. And this gives you really great insights into a relationship between two data points. So here I can see, all right, well, of all the records I've received, what am I receiving the most of? In this example, I can see, it's pretty close between the request for information and common app. But within those two data sources, what data am I seeing? And if I hover over here, I can see, well, I have 23 complete app and I have 196 submitted app. For RFI, I have more prospects, which makes sense. Complete app, and you kind of get the idea here, right? So it allows you to build the ability to group your data together, but then get insights into what that data is here below. So if I wanted to see, this is what's really nice about this, the 196 common app records, I could actually click this box right here and it will filter and show me, similar to a pivot table, what those records are. So again, just really powerful abilities for reporting and visualizing your reports. All right, so I do want to just kind of navigate over to dashboards. So what's the difference between a report and a dashboard? This is a sample director dashboard. And really the main distinguishing point is that dashboards allow you to pull multiple reports. So the prerequisite to have things on the dashboard is to have a report first, but then I can have multiple kind of reports that I view all the time in one place. So as a director, instead of going to report A, B, and C, I can just simply have those things together right here. And I can navigate to that report if I need to, but I can just see this quickly in one kind of snapshot. Now, one thing just to mention here is that dashboards do give you the ability to visualize some data in a different way than a report. So one example of that might be, let's say you had something such as like all my new applications this month for fall or something like that. You can actually display it as a number, right? So new apps this month, last year, and you can see it more just quick snapshot of a number, even though it's referring to a report, and that makes it very accessible. What you'll notice here is you're able to quickly, if I click edit, it's just drag and drop. So I can resize these if I would like to. If I click into the details of one, let's use this as an example. I click the pencil icon. Here gives me the different options I have to display this. So this does not override the report chart. So if somebody's using this report, it's just on this dashboard, you're displaying the data differently. So things like a gauge chart, if you're going against a certain goal, right? Where you against your goal, it gives you more like a funnel option. That makes sense in certain use cases, obviously with the missions and funnels. This is the number example where you can just see total applications quickly, and I can just save that. But again, it gives you the ability to view your data in your system in different ways, and it's very easy to add, resize, and things of that nature. So that's essentially the main difference between a report and a dashboard. Now we want to be respectful of time, so I just have one or two more points till we get to Q&A. The next piece is, with a report or a dashboard, one of the most common questions that we receive is, can they be emailed, right? I don't necessarily need to log into the system all the time if I'm the director of admissions, or perhaps like a VP of admissions, and the director's doing most of the login. Can I just like email a dashboard to my director of admissions every Monday, right, on certain metrics? The short answer is yes. And that is that subscribe option here. So under subscribe, you can define this dashboard in particular, or perhaps you create a different dashboard, the time and the frequency and who should receive this. That concept also applies for specific reports. So a dashboard is going to be more snapshot, multiple reports together. I would say that's the most common. But going back to another client I worked with, they want a report every day that shows all their form submissions for that day, like a summary. So I have that team kind of subscribe to that report, and it just quickly gives them insights of like, all right, we got 50, people who filled out a form today, and that sort of insight. So yeah, so that's a quick summary on dashboards. Now there are two proprietary kind of function features and functions that I do want to highlight before I turn it over to Lawrence. And this is kind of specific to Enrollment Rx products. So the first one is this idea of a touch point with an initial lead source. So a quick kind of summary of this as this loads here is what is a touch point? A touch point basically indicates every single time somebody raises their hand, because it's not very common, right, that you're going to have somebody just raise their hand one time. It's going to be more common that they raise their hand multiple times. Perhaps they fill it out a form, they fill it out an application, they filled out a different form because they saw some other ad. Perhaps they attended an event. You want to be able to capture every time they raise their hand, not just the original source that they were created with. And so as part of our core functionality, we have this idea of a touch point where every time that, whether it be through an import or raising their hand through a form or, a manual creation, there's multiple ways you can do it. You can capture that data in what's called a touch point. And that touch point can then live as an attribution of all your marketing efforts related to that one contact. So what you're seeing here is not just the original created source, but every time a record actually raised their hand and things related to that record. So as I look at this Pam student contact record as an example, I can see that Pam has raised her hand twice, one through a RFI, so request for information, and a second time she attended an open house. And then so what this allows you to do is build reports, not just on the contact. So Pam was created by this source, but what are all the times that Pam has raised her hands? And any sort of marketing parameters that you're using and capturing through forms, like using Form Builder, you can pass those parameters, so such as UTM parameters and those sorts of things. And you can really get great attribution kind of tracking related to your marketing efforts. The last kind of piece I want to mention here is another proprietary kind of feature and functionality to our core product called status tracking. So what's the difference between, what does that mean? What that means is we have functionality in our code where every single time they change what's called an admission status, and again, that can be defined by your team, but common examples would be inquiry to started app to submitted app. You don't necessarily always need to see, all right, well, what are the current stages? That helps, of course. Like, hey, how many do I currently have in started app? And then how many do I currently have in submitted app? The beauty of status tracking is that every time that changes, so inquiry to started app to submitted app, it creates its own individual record kind of behind the scenes so that you have a true funnel and count of, the number of people who've gone through each status. And so this is an example here where if I look at this record and like kind of the goals for Aaron, this is not how many Aaron has currently in started app. This is how many Aaron has had in started app at some point, right? It's a different kind of conversation and a critical one for enrollment because it's really important to have those insights of how they're progressing through the funnel and how many people are versus just, where are they at right now? And so that's just kind of the last kind of piece I want to mention related to that. So with that, just a quick summary, reports and dashboards and Listviews are great tools for admissions teams using both Enrollment Rx and Salesforce. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Lawrence.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, that was great. I think that, just to reiterate what you were saying there, and please confirm. So I think in the end there, you were showing us a couple of examples of those enrollment management specific, recruitment and admission specific types of reports that we really see in our clients. And also that we had to develop functionality into our products in order to accommodate, right? That's part of filling in those gaps there for recruitment and admissions on Salesforce to give those tools so that people can do those kinds of reports. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly right. And Salesforce is very powerful in the types of automations you can do within it. But the beauty of our core product is it's just a few clicks of a button and our code takes care of it for you versus having to build these kind of complex processes behind the scenes.
Excellent. Fantastic. All right, thanks. Well, I know we're going to be answering questions in just a second here, and I'll remind everybody, please do drop questions into the chat window if you do have questions that you would like to pose. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody that there are 2 more remaining sessions next Wednesday and the following Wednesday after that. Next Wednesday, we're going to be talking about integrating Salesforce and your student information system. So really, how does Salesforce and Banner or Colleague or PeopleSoft or Genzabar or your other student information systems, how do we make Salesforce and the SAS speak to each other and do that bi-directional data exchange? So I'm going to be joined by our Director of Integration next week to talk about that. And then finally, to wrap up the webinar series, we're going to do on March 13th, we're going to talk about implementation best practices. How do you plan to implement Salesforce for recruitment and admissions? I'm going to be joined by our Director of Implementation, Kathy Coe, and she's going to be sharing all of our tips and tricks and best practices to how to think through a proper plan for implementing Salesforce at your university or college. So with that, let me say that we're going to take the questions now. So we do have a question here, Matt, which I think you did talk about, but I'm pleased that somebody asked it because it gives us a chance to reiterate. So somebody's asking about, can you confirm that custom fields, that you can report on custom fields? Now, I think that when the question is, can you report on custom fields? I think you showed a lot of examples, not just reports. You showed list views, you showed dashboards, and you showed reports of lots of different examples where you might use a field of data and use that maybe to filter or display that content. So this is a very common question we get all the time in sales demos, right? College might say, we collect a particular field, a unique field, and we want to be able to filter or segment our population by that field. So can you just reiterate again, how does Salesforce lend itself to that?
Yeah, it's probably one of the best features of Salesforce is it's just quick where you can create a field. Now there has to be thought into creating a field. You just don't want to create a bunch of fields to create them. But let's just use the example of UTM parameters. Let's say you're working with your marketing team and the marketing team wants to capture those parameters. Well, by creating that custom field to house that parameter, you can not only capture it, but then quickly build that into a report, whether it be our proprietary objects or standard Salesforce objects.
Right. There's another good question here, which pertains to what I know we call user governance, but this question here is how can a person, how do we control which fields a person has access to? But I think, Matt, maybe if you can just even expand on this, I know you addressed it already, but just to reiterate. So all of the controls when it comes to that user experience, not just on what dashboards and reports they can see, but I think also emphasizing, back to the previous point, if you do create a custom field, and what if not everybody can see that field? So then when somebody goes to create a report, are they going to be able to use that field? Or what if there's a report that was created with that field already in it, and that person might see that report? What does that experience look like? How does that all work?
Yeah, so when it comes to fields in Salesforce, it's governed by the profile of the person, and it's very granular down to the field level. So as an example, if they did not want to have access to see the field of lead source, they may see every other field in the contact record if you choose them to, but they're not going to see that as part of a report. So the nice thing about a dashboard is that, let's say you had something like grouping by lead source as a dashboard report. There's a view as feature of that where you can view as the person that has more permission. So they're not seeing the granular information, but they can still see the overall kind of summary of that. The other thing I just want to mention related to roles and profiles and sharing is there is common examples where we have schools that have maybe a grad department and an undergrad department, and they don't want to see each other's stuff, right? They want to be siloed. And there's sharing mechanisms around the entire record itself that can be implemented within Salesforce so that when you are building a report that says, show me all applicants this month or something like that, it's going to respect the permissions that you have and what you can see. So as an undergraduate person building a report, if you decide to do that, you won't see any of the graduate people. And it's very easy to kind of silo and segment that information as part of Salesforce. And then finally, the last thing I'll just mention is that anybody you choose to give the ability to build reports around, you can. And so let's say you have associate director of admissions that you want to give them that ability. It's just a few settings to give them that capability where an admissions counselor, perhaps they could build their own Listviews, but can only view reports. That's all very much possible.
Awesome. Matt, there's one more question here, which I think is also a great question. So we talked about our proprietary report types and our proprietary functionality as it pertains to reports. But this question says, do we use the standard Salesforce reporting functionality to create those reports, or do we have something proprietary that we are building those reports in? So can you talk about everything, I suppose, proprietary as it pertains to Enrollment Rx? That, yeah, is uniquely ours that we deliver. Is that available for reporting in the standard Salesforce reporting and dashboard engine? And I suppose related to that is what we were saying earlier, is anything custom. But I know in our world, whether it's custom or Enrollment Rx, those will basically be treated the same in Salesforce speak. But yeah, anything proprietary Enrollment Rx, are we using something proprietary to create those reports, or are we using the Salesforce engine to do that?
Yeah, it's all just standard Salesforce functionality to build those reports. The proprietary nature of it is just the data and how that data is created. So, for example, the custom object of status tracking would not be available as a report type if I was not using our products, right? You can just have a Salesforce report and find status tracking. But the building of that status tracking report, the drag and drop features, the putting on a dashboard, all that's just standard Salesforce. You just now have access to that data.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. Well, I know we're right at the hour, so we're going to let everybody go. I'm sure everybody's got their next appointment to get to. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, you can register for next week's event on our website at enrollmentrx.com, and these will all be recorded on our YouTube channel. And thank you, Matt, as well, for joining. And thank you so much, Audrey, as always, for arranging everything. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, everyone.